How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Rain Race podcast on a Wednesday. I think last episode you and I made a note about how we were every other Tuesday-ish, and we were really on a good streak for a while. I think ever since 2024 ticked over, we were pretty consistently hitting every other Tuesday. Streak was bound to break somewhere, especially with a couple of guys as unreliable as us, and we're also 20 minutes late tonight, but that's all right. We're here for another episode. Stu, how are you doing tonight?
Look, you can blame all of the late problems on me, okay? The Tuesday to Wednesday, the 20 minutes late, it can all be blamed on me. I can take it. I apologize. But listen, with all the excitement in the air, this is a double race week, so
It is.
Yeah, I think we can all put that behind us and just focus on the racing that we have.
Yeah. You know what? Come the weekend, I don't think anybody's going to remember this little mishap. Um, you mentioned it's a double. Yeah, you mentioned it's a doubleheader weekend. It's not the only doubleheader weekend we'll be having this year. Matter of fact, we're going to have another one in I think 3 weeks' time, if I'm not mistaken, with the IMSA round at Laguna Seca and the WEC race at Spa. Yep. But before that, this weekend we have the IMSA race at Long Beach and the WEC race at Imola. And we've got a preview for both of those races lined up for you guys tonight, and not a whole lot else. So, even though we are slightly off schedule here, if you have any questions that you'd like us to try to get to in this episode, you can leave them down in the chat box on YouTube. Or if you're listening on a podcasting platform and you want to tune into one of the future live shows, youtube.com/@GTRain. I already mentioned that in the intro. Or you can just send us some of your questions on X or previous episode, whichever way seems to work best for you. Usually put out a call for questions day before or early morning of the episode. So, it's going to start things off here. The IMSA race at Long Beach on Saturday this weekend, as it traditionally is, as a supporting race for IndyCar in Long Beach. We got a sprint race with two classes, GTP and GTD. Stu, I'm going to let you take the reins on this one. Oh.
Yeah, we have a number of, before I even get into the driver car changes, not musical chairs, but some slight changes that we have going on for Long Beach. I mean, what can we say about Long Beach other than it's one of those races that seems to be circled on fans' calendars, on drivers' calendars. It's one of the, if you're not considering Long Beach one of the best weekends of the season, then I think you need to take a second look at it. There's incredible racing that goes on at Long Beach. It's a very tight and technical street circuit. It's actually a newer track, especially when you consider some of the tracks that have been on the IMSA calendar and become very established. Long Beach is one of the newer ones on the IMSA calendar. They've only been going there consistently since 2006. But in that time, they've built up an incredible history of races here. With that, there are some significant news stories going into the weekend. There's a number of driver changes, a number of teams that are coming onto the paddock just for this race. And one of the ones that we'll kick off with is a new driver that's coming into the fold. Not a new driver, but a new driver in the sense that they don't generally race in this entry, and that's Mike Rockenfeller. He's going to be racing in the Proton competition, Porsche 963 in the GTP class. Of course, the conflict with the WEC race. It was always a question of what is Proton going to do with this driver position. Mike Rockenfeller, a very, not just a serviceable driver, a very good driver to have injected into their lineup for this race. Of course, with the GTD Pro class not being present at Long Beach, it is only GTD and GTP. And Mike Rockenfeller being part of the Ford factory program in GTD Pro that made him available for this. He has experience with JDC Miller Motorsports last year in that Porsche 963. This is pretty much as good of a fill-in driver, I think, as you could get. Really excited to see Rocky filling in that role. Did you have anyone else in your mind, Chris, that you could envision filling in that role, or is this is kind of a no-brainer, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a good fit. Like you said, he has experience in the 963 from Petit Le Mans last year. Um, no, I'm sorry. It wasn't Petit Le Mans. Where did he race for them, JDC?
He raced. It was most of the season, basically
Right.
from Laguna Honor. He was one
Yeah,
of the regular drivers. Yeah, so
with
he
Teeman.
has plenty of experience.
Yeah, my mind's a blur at this point.
You're
Couldn't
thinking
remember
of
if he was a
Jensen
fill-in
Button,
or
I
if he was a
think.
full-time. I was thinking of Jensen.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Mike Rockenfeller was the main driver alongside Tiemann Vanderhelm in the JDC Porsche last year. Plenty of experience in the 963. Plenty of experience as sports car racing driver in general. Still the distance record holder at Le Mans, alongside Timo Bernard and Romain Dumas. Yeah, I think it's a good pairing. I think it'll be good to see what he gets done in that car this weekend. I think it's still pretty strong driver lineup. And Long Beach, as we're going to get into, is very much potentially a race of attrition. It's very rare that we see a perfectly clean race there. So given a mature driver lineup and maybe a little bit of luck on their hands might be something to look forward to this weekend for them.
Yeah, yeah, it's about as good as you could get, I think, for Proton, and definitely look for them to do some big things here going into Long Beach. This is not the only driver replacement that is going on into this round, though. On the GTD side of things, we also have some driver changes. The first one being in the number 27 Heart of Racing Aston Martin. Regular driver Zach Robichon is also in a conflict with the WEC race in Imola, so he is not going to be present. That is taking priority for him. So it is instead going to be Spencer Pumpelly that is coming in to fill that role. Of course, Spencer has raced. He raced in the Rolex 24. He's actually the Endurance Cup driver. Sorry, not just the Rolex 24, the Sebring 12 hour as well with Magnus Racing. So not only does Spencer has plenty of experience in sports car racing on his own, but more importantly, also has experience in that brand new Aston Martin. This is going to be one of two. Actually, I don't know. Magnus Racing isn't going to be on the grid at Long Beach. So I actually think no, there is still going to be two Aston Martins. We'll get to that in a second. There is still going to be multiple Aston Martins on the grid at Long Beach, but having that familiarity with a brand new car, very important for the Heart of Racing, and Spencer Pumpelly is a great fill in there. The other driver change to note here is a little bit more disappointing in my mind, because we know that Robichon is going to be back here, but in the number 66 Gradient Racing Acura, we have to bid farewell to Catherine Legg for at least the rest of the season. She is taking a step back. She is not going to be racing, at least to our knowledge, for the remainder of the season in that car. And stepping in is going to be Stephen McAleer, filling in for her for the rest of the season. So Stephen McAleer, again, another very capable driver. You know, it's not a bad fill-in to get for Catherine Legg for the rest of the year. But whether this has to do with Catherine Legg recently being announced, she's going to be racing in or attempting to qualify for the Indy 500 and hopefully competing in the Indy 500. Whether there's anything else that is going along with that, we don't really know at this point. But regardless, Cat is not going to be in the car for the rest of the season. Those are a couple of fairly big driver swaps or notable omissions on the driver front for Long Beach. But do you have any thoughts on either of those?
Not particularly. I think that there are some positives that I think overshadowed those stories a little bit more. Couple of, or at least one new entry for the GTD class, which we'll get into in a sec here.
Yep. Yeah, I think you're right. The new entries may the one-off entries may overshadow some of the driver swaps, and there's some pretty significant one-off entries. I'm going to start with the one that is not less new to the grid, but we have seen it a couple of times in recent years. Vassar Sullivan is going to be bringing a second entry to the IMSA grid in the GTD class. Of course, with GTD Pro not present at Long Beach this weekend, they do have a second car that's available to them. That of course, it's the same cars that compete in GTD and GTD Pro, so why not bring it in a one-off entry? That's what Vassar Sullivan is going to do. You are going to see that is going to be, the number 89 entry competing there, and that is going to consist of drivers Ben Barnicoat and Parker Thompson. So again, drivers that have familiarity with this platform. As we'll talk about in a little bit, we both think that that is going to be a very strong contender on the GTD grid this season.
Not just us, by the way.
Yeah, not just us. You're right.
Seemed to be very popular pick.
And then some very significant and this is just fun, good news to hear. The other edition, it's a one-off entry, sure, but the number 28 Aston Martin is going to be added to the grid, and it's going to be put on the grid by none other than Flying Lizard. Flying Lizard competed in IMSA for many years, not just IMSA, in its iterations before that as well. It's this is just a great name to see return to the grid, even if it's in a one-off capacity. They're going to have drivers Andy Lee and Elias Sabo behind the wheel of, again, one of the brand new Aston Martin Vantage GT3 Evos. They are competing in that car in a regular basis in, I believe it is, I don't know if it's GT World Challenge or GT America. I'm not 100% certain on that. So this is going to be a one-off entry for them, but certainly some exciting news that we're going to have some of these one-off entries on the grid for Long Beach.
Absolutely. And just to throw a quick side note in there, Flying Lizard is coming in from GT America in that championship. They're the key standout to me. I think a little bit unexpected. We've always kind of heard Flying Lizard say we're interested in coming back to IMSA competition. It was, I think, frankly, a little bit too expensive for them. They didn't quite have the right backing for a long time. I am very enthused by that news, though. Flying Lizard, I mentioned this on Twitter a couple days ago, is the team that I sort of went to when I became an ALMS fan for the first time back in 2008. I saw somebody in the chat already mentioning, I remember them in the ALMS era and at Le Mans with a Porsche. I think that's where most people remember them from, dating way back to, I think their first season in the ALMS was 2004, if I'm not mistaken. With some of their iconic liveries that largely stayed the same over this season. Since actually they still race that car over in GT America, I believe, with that livery. Or one of the championships. It might be a Porsche Cup class rather than GT3 now. Excuse my lack of knowledge in the GT America ranks. Yeah, they're the key standout to me. Sort of interested to see them in an Aston Martin, although I do know they race that car, that GT3 in GT America. But bit of something new there. The one thing that I don't think you mentioned, please correct me if I'm wrong, but we also touched on it in the last episode, is the lack of the 17 AWA Corvette. That does not come as a surprise. That was, of course, victim to somewhat of an interesting news story post-Sebring. We discussed in the last episode, but they will not be present on the grid at Long Beach. It will only be the sole 13 AWA Corvette holding down the fort for GM in the GT ranks this weekend.
Yeah, it's unfortunate to only see the single Corvette on the grid, especially with the absence of GTD Pro this year. You think if we had GTD Pro on the grid, although that would be a significantly larger grid, the regular season number of entries for GTD Pro is significantly higher than it was last year, which could cause problems on its own. But only the single Corvette, but there's still plenty of good entries for us to focus on. Now, before we get too far down the rabbit hole of talking about Long Beach, just to give a quick recap of how the points are shaping up going into the Long Beach Grand Prix. In GTP, it is a tie at the top of the leaderboard between the number 7 Porsche Penske Motorsports entry and the number 40 Wayne Taylor Racing Acura. They both have 706 points, and they are 106 points ahead of their closest competition. That is the 31 Whelen Engineering Cadillac. It's a couple of Cadillacs in 3rd and 4th. And then we have a BMW that rounds out the top 5. That BMW is only 136 points back. And we know how strong they came on at last year's Long Beach Grand Prix. They look like they could be serious contenders heading into this year's race. On the GTD side of things, it is the number 57 Windward Racing Mercedes. They've won the first 2 races of the season. Kind of a no-brainer that they're going to be leading the points. The number 47, actually, there's a lot of Ferraris in the top 5 in points. Number 47, Centelar Racing Ferrari is 136 points back. The Wright Motorsports, number 120, 155 points back. And then we have the Conquest Racing Ferrari and the AF Corsa Ferrari that round out the top 5. So, we're still at the beginning of the season for the point standings, but this is the first Sprint Cup race of the season. We're going to see a lot of the full season. This is the point where we start to see the full season competitors separate themselves from just the Michelin Endurance Cup competitors. So that's going to be fun to watch this weekend. But should we talk a little bit about the track and Long Beach?
Yeah, absolutely. I think with the loss of Lime Rock from the IMSA calendar as of this season and also next season now, Long Beach is now the sort of bull ring style IMSA race that you see. I mean, if you think, we're going to speak in NASCAR terms here, so pardon us if you're over in Europe and do not pay attention to NASCAR, but you think a track like Martinsville gets brought up a lot. I think that's what people came used to with Lime Rock. But I think Long Beach is a very similar style. You're sort of at the mercy of going hero or going zero at Long Beach. We saw that last year with the finish in the GTP class. I think that it's a track that really promotes that style of racing. I think the big question that a lot of people have, and in fact, I already saw a comment in the chat about this, is I think turn 1 at Long Beach is the biggest watch zone. If they can make it through turn 1 on the first lap, I think there's a chance, and I actually put this in my predictions, which we'll talk about in a little bit here. I think if they can make it past turn 1, which they didn't last year, on the first lap, then we might be in for a pretty clean race. Or at least a full course yellow free race. That doesn't mean it's going to be completely free of a little bit of using the bumpers here and there, but that's really, I think, what it boils down to at a track like Long Beach.
Yeah, the big problem points at Long Beach, we see it year in and year out, is turn 1 and turn 11, or the last corner on the track, the first and the last corner on the track. You've talked about turn 1. It's a very wide portion of Shoreline Drive that narrows up very quickly on the exit of turn 1, and that can cause plenty of problems. I mean, you know what? It does a pretty nice job of sorting them out for the fountain section of the course, at least, because otherwise that would surely become Calamity Corner. But the other main corner to watch is the hairpin. We see so many lazy bumps and spins and track blocking spins. Doesn't take much to block the track through there. So definitely a couple of corners to watch for, and especially with the GTP class cars, those are corners you have to be very patient through. If you don't exercise patience, it's probably going to bite you in the butt. But you're right. If we can make it through turn 1, then there is a reasonable shot at a clean race. We almost saw it last year, with the exception of the first lap and the second to last lap. So see if we can get there this year.
So I'm trying to think the other big key talking points from Long Beach. Kind of difficult to pass at. like I said a couple of minutes ago, it's really, I think the best passing opportunities for Long Beach are probably going to be turn one, the end of that long straightaway. There's also, I'm very unfamiliar with the corner names at Long Beach. Sorry about that. But there is the straightaway after, I believe it's turn five, going into that left-hander. It's either turn four, turn five.
There's turn one is a good passing opportunity. Turn turn six, I think turn seven, you can kind of get a pass done.
Yeah.
But then there's the last decent passing opportunity that isn't even it's not necessarily about the entry into turn nine. I think it's about the exit that you get off of turn eight, going down that sort of back stretch where it's passing under. There's a couple of bridges or a bridge it passes under.
Yeah.
You know, if you can get a good run out of turn eight, then you can sort of capitalize on that into turn nine. But yeah, very few passing opportunities here at Long Beach.
Yeah. And I think that'll bring us into a couple of our picks. We have tried to make a habit of putting out some picks for IMSA and WEC races as of recent. And because it's a doubleheader weekend, we had to do a doubleheader worth of picks. I went for a little bit of a left field pick. You know, I think you mentioned a couple minutes ago how strong BMW was at Long Beach last year. I think that was the first outing that we saw from BMW where we said maybe Sebring last year wasn't a complete fluke, where they just picked up from the attrition at the end of the race. We did see some attrition at Long Beach last year as well that they were able to capitalize on, but I think they showed genuine pace there last year. Given a good qualifying effort from them, I think that they're a bit of a dark horse pick. I'll admit it's a dark horse pick, but sometimes you got to have a little bit of fun with that. You picked, on the other hand, going for the Zero to Hero Tour, the number 10 Wayne Taylor Racing with Andretti Global Acura. Car hasn't had a whole lot of luck this season compared to their sister number 40 car. A little bit curious why you decided to choose that car.
Well, you know what? They've got all their bad luck out of the way. We can acknowledge that with the first couple rounds of the season. They haven't really had things go their way. But this was the fastest car that was at Long Beach last year. Wayne Taylor Racing, I guess it was technically with Andretti at this point last year. The partnership had started up at this point. So they brought the fastest car. They were faster than the number 60 Meyershank Racing Acura last year. I'm confident that they can carry that through into this year. They had a heartbreaking ending to their race last year, so I think they're going to be a little bit more hungry to make up for that in this year's race. And I'm really liking that number 10 Acura. I think this is when the number 10 breaks through for their first, GTP class win. But you mentioned BMW, and BMW was also very strong. This was where they put some legitimacy to the pace that they showed at Sebring last year, and they did look very strong in this race. But why did you? Yeah, what's the thought process behind picking them over? Porsche's looked very strong, and of course they did win this race last year. And then I think Acura also looked really strong. You think they can overcome that hump?
I've said it for a while. I think BMW's due an on-track victory. They've shown a mixed bag of pace at a lot of races. I don't think they've really been the favorite for almost every single race that they've been in. And as I said, it's a dark horse. I don't know if it's the most likely pick, to be honest with you, even though they're the ones I chose. But I think that Long Beach is one of the tracks on the calendar that's going to suit them the best. I think they have a car that seems like it's set up to handle pretty well. And Long Beach is obviously one of the most corner-friendly, happy tracks on the calendar. So I think that there's a weekend that they're going to pull it off. This is definitely one of those possibilities. We'll have to see, though. It really depends. To me, it boils down to two things. It's how do they qualify and whether or not the race has a bunch of carnage going on. If they qualify in the first top four, probably, they should have enough of an opportunity to find their way to the lead if they have the ultimate performance, either just via pit stops or just making a couple lucky on-track passes. But on the flip side of things, Long Beach is a track that we've said before completely promotes some carnage sometimes, and maybe they find their way to the front elsewhere. If it is through a track blocking incident at the hairpin, then maybe they squeeze their way through.
No, I like the BMW pick as well. I think I think they can build off what they did last year.
And I didn't specify, I don't think here, but specifically the 25 BMW. Connor DeFilippi. Is Connor DeFilippi? I don't think you know the answer to this. I'm trying to remember if he's a California native. I believe he is.
That I do not know.
Connor DeFilippi. Because I'm mixing up him right now and Gustavo Menezes, who I know is a California native. But I believe he was from California as well. But 25 is the one that I had to pick for. In GTD, though, you, myself, and it seemed like a couple other people were shameless, I would say, in picking the number 89 Lexus, the one-off entry for this race. They just have a very strong driver lineup. I think that car has been very strong. I sort of went against the grain on picking them at Sebring and ultimately bit my words on that. But I think that for this race, they have the car to beat. I think they have the driver lineup to beat in that car right now. And it seemed like an easy pick to me. I wasn't going to be shameless on that one. I was just going to go and pick the easy one. Ben Barnicoat and Parker Thompson for the driver lineup in that car. And it seems like you are on the same wavelength as me.
Yes, I was. To finish our thought about Connor DeFilippi, he is from Cornelius, North Carolina.
Oh.
According to driver database. So
okay.
We not
really close,
not California.
Nope.
But the number 89 Vassar Sullivan, there's so many things to like about this car coming into this race. You have an incredible driver lineup that know how to win. They're very familiar with the car. Vassar Sullivan is not entering this car for it to go and just mosey around middle of the pack. They're trophy hunting with this car, and this entry is going to be their sole purpose is to go out there and win this race. And I think that it's very capable of doing that. You look at a lot of the other entries, as much as we talked about Long Beach being a race where it has the potential of going full course yellow free, this is also a track that can bite you at every single corner. And there are going to be lots of cars that are, taking it easy with the championship in mind. We saw there were two cars last year that had qualifying crashes that did not compete in this race. The number 93, Acura, and Rexy last year. Rexy didn't race. They didn't take the green flag. So surviving this weekend is going to be on the minds for a lot of these teams. And if you look at the number 89 entry, they are 100% focused on winning. So I think that's an easy pick for the win.
Yep. A couple of questions related to the Long Beach weekend in no particular order, just because I'm reading them as I see them. I feel like it's strange that there's no GTD Pro present. Is there no space? Ultimately, that's what it boils down to. Yes, you might ask the question, why GTD rather than GTD Pro? Might be interesting to have an all-pro race at Long Beach. I'd say the short answer to that is just GTD has more cars than GTD Pro. And having the GTP class there with the GTD cars kind of maximizes the number of cars that they can have on the grid, while also not, I suppose they could try to do like an LMP2 GTD Pro and GTP race if they wanted to. Might get a little bit too complicated. You want to try to simplify things with a tight street circuit like Long Beach. And I think that more than that, this is a good opportunity for some of those GTD teams to get some TV time. Yep. Unfortunately, just by way of nature, the fact that the GTD Pro teams are usually the ones who are out front winning most of the GT races overall. Some of those smaller GTD teams don't get a lot of recognition, and I think this is a chance for them to showcase that, hopefully in a positive way and not in a, a track block of the hairpin.
Very true. Very true. Yeah.
Which actually, go ahead.
I was just gonna say it. I love this. I love this class structure for this race because we do have the GTP cars, which are going to be so fun to watch around Long Beach. But we're also going to be able to really get a. We're going to have more focus put on the GTD cars and the story of the battles that are unfolding in that class. So really looking forward to that. This 2-class structure of a race is going to give us some great storylines from GTP, but really from GTD as well. And they don't get highlighted as often as they should be. There's some great racing there's going to be great racing that takes place in that class this weekend.
Yep. And actually, I mentioned track block and the hairpin a couple times. The last prediction we did not get to mention, which I already sort of teased my own, which is that my bonus prediction is that the race will not have any full course yellow and will go the distance. Your bonus pick was that there will not be a track blocking spin in the hairpin this year. So I guess our picks kind of go hand in hand. Yep. It's one way or the other. If we do get a track block in the hairpin, then we're both wrong, I suppose.
Yeah, we could see both of those picks go down the tube very quickly. Yeah. That's for sure.
Yep. Just looking at a couple of community predictions that you guys had from that event. Tarek SC on Twitter /X said GTP will go to the 31 Wheeland Cadillac. Cadillac, I think was very strong at Long Beach in the DPI era, especially in some of the earlier years. And I think could have been an easy contender for the win last year in the hands of Chip Ganassi Racing if it were not for the turn 1 incident that beheld the number 01 car. But yeah, I think that's, you can't look past the 31. They had that disappointing race at Sebring after really being the favorite all weekend. Maybe they're going to look for some vengeance on that. And then also the unsurprising continuation with the Vassar-Sullivan Lexus. Wasn't specified on specifically which one, but I think you can't really go wrong with either one.
Yeah.
And at Toyota GR010 said the GTP class will go to either of the Acuras, didn't specify which one, sort of lining up with what you said. And what do you know, GTD will go to one of the 2 Lexuses. And then from YouTube, this is from good friend Formula Jonah, producing some good IMSA and WEC content over there as well. Said that same thing as you, that the 10 car will win in GTP, and the 32 Korthoff Preston Mercedes will win in the GTD class. A little bit of a reaction there from you on GTD.
Yeah, they've been knocking on the door. The Mercedes hasn't been incredible at Long Beach in recent years, but Windward's been off to a pretty good start this season. So those Mercedes could be sneaky dark horses in GTD.
Yeah. Bonus pick for me, 27 cars start the race on Saturday. We won't lose anybody in practice or qualifying. Wild bonus. Someone's mowing the lawn at the fountain, calling it now.
Oh.
I know that's happened in the IndyCar race there a long time ago. I don't know the last time someone's ended up in the fountain. I think it's been over 10 years now. But I don't think, to my memory, it hasn't happened in the IMSA, the unified IMSA era at Long Beach, to my knowledge.
Is it also mowing the lawn, or aren't there usually flowers?
There's like flowers
and
there, but
yeah.
We'll let it slide. Surprised you guys can do any sort of predictions. My mind's blank until FP1 due to how detailed the BOP adjustments are. Yeah, and that's sort of why I do it that way. I don't want to look too far into the BOP tables and try to pick out, they were fast in practice, these guys were fast in qualifying. I just want to go straight to the table. This is how these teams did last year. This is how I expect that they could stack up this year. They're very informal picks. We're not taking them too serious. I'm just
No.
looking.
We're taking these very seriously.
Well, I'm
Our
trying to think.
reputations are on the line with these picks.
Most of these picks do not hit. All right, that's one thing that I've realized over time is we had a couple right at Sebring between both of us.
Yeah, between both of us, that's the
Yeah,
key.
and so we get a couple right ones, and then some of them are just wildly off. So like some of them will go out in a lap one crash and then be nowhere for the rest of the race. So
Yeah.
there's you shouldn't be taking these too much to heart. A couple people just tuning in saying that they were to catch a live show finally. Thank you for tuning in. I'm just going down the rest of the questions. Get the appeal of the setup at Long Beach, proper customer racing minus the GTPs. Yep, as you and I said, Stu, I think it's a good chance for those smaller customer teams to get a focus on them. Is there a race in IMSA where lap one is more important than Long Beach? My guess is no.
Yeah. Well,
I think you know what? I think that's accurate on two different accounts. Number one, Long Beach is the shortest race on this calendar. Is Detroit a 2 hour 40-minute race?
Or no, Detroit. I think it's the same 100-minute race format. So that was the other one that came to my mind was that Detroit. What we saw from the races, the Michelin Pilot Challenge race and the IndyCar race there last year.
Yep,
it's gonna be very important as well.
Yeah, so I'd say it's up there with Detroit. Mostly due to the fact that you don't have as much time left in the race to bring yourself into it. You think of a 24-hour race, you have plenty of time, especially with IMSA's waiver on rules. Even at some of the shorter endurance races, be it a 10-hour, 6-hour endurance race, lap one's not too important. But also just keeping the car clean. It is so easy to end your race in turn one at Long Beach, whether you run into the tires or... You don't even have to hit anything, really. If you fall to the back of the class, good luck passing all of those cars with the size of the classes that we have in that championship nowadays. I would say it's up there, probably tied with Detroit.
Yep.
And I think... Let's see. Don't recall the fountain incident happening in Grand Am or ALMS either. I want to say there's one time when it's happened, but nothing comes to my memory. All right. So I think that covers the IMSA race at Long Beach for this weekend. We will be back, by the way, next week. I didn't mention that at the top of the show. We're going to do a rare 2 weeks in a row edition of the Rain Race podcast to recap all of this action that we're previewing right now. I want to switch things over to the WEC race at Imola. The first time that we'll have the 6 hours at Imola since 2011 when it was around on the Intercontinental Le Mans Cup, which was sort of the predecessor to what we now know as the World Endurance Championship. Also potentially a one-off race, as Monza is undergoing some renovations this year that prevented them from hosting the 6 hours at Monza. We may or may not see the race at Imola back on the calendar next year. Although I would predict, you know what? I'm not going to predict anything because I'll touch on this later, but I'm getting pretty bad at predicting things and I'm going to keep my mouth shut before I make myself look like more of a fool. But that last race at Imola back in 2011 was won pretty comfortably by the Peugeot 908. Repeat performance of that this year? A little bit less likely, but we'll see. Same
That'd
grid.
Be a heck of an entrance for that car.
Would be. Same grid that we had for the season opener at Qatar with 19 hypercars, 18 LMGT3 cars. You just sort of mentioned there the debut of the Evo spec Peugeot 9X8. We've talked about that car countless times now on this podcast. Different tire sizes all around, and then also that rear wing that is the most visual difference, but they also have some bodywork changes on that car. Be interested to see how that car hits the ground running. They are running heavier than they were at Qatar, so I don't know if they're going to be quite the favorite, not really the favorite, but quite as strong as they were at Qatar. I think Imola is going to be a bit of a learning race for them to understand that car's new philosophy. But well, hey, we'll see. Maybe they do hit that one lap advantage with the two car 1-2. The number 2 Cadillac is a bit of an interesting note on this race. They'll be only running with 2 drivers because of that scheduling clash with IMSA. I would expect a similar story in the next race at Spa when IMSA at Laguna Seca clashes with WEC. They'll be running with the standard driver lineup for the full season: Earl Bamber and Alex Lynn. Jules Gounon will be subbing in for Ferdinand Habsburg at that race. Habsburg, unfortunately, was involved in a testing crash late last month at Aragon. If that name sounds familiar, then that was the same track that we discussed in last episode, where Sebastian Vettel was testing the Porsche 963, right around that same time when Habsburg was involved in that crash. Ended up sustaining a back injury in that. Hoping to see him back in the car at Spa, or at bare minimum hoping for a quick and speedy recovery for Ferdinand to get back in the 35 Alpine. One of the things that I'm keeping an eye on for this weekend, even though it is still a little bit early and could very well change, is the weather. We're seeing right now on the forecast that Saturday especially looks like it could potentially be a wet qualifying session, which would really shake things up and make me very interested to see what that old Spec 9X8 could have done on its previous platform, where it was really a strong runner at Le Mans last year when they were running in the rain because of their ability to deploy that hybrid energy a lot earlier. Now they're on level pegging with everybody else deploying hybrid energy at 190 kilometers per hour. Potentially might see some of that rain dip into Sunday as well for the race, first half of the race, if anything. But we'll have to see. That might very well change. And the last thing I got on my note here, and I want to give credit to Erwin Wayne for this over on Twitter, is the number of manufacturers in the hypercar class who have tested at Imola in the past year. It's actually quite a few, some more that you may think, or more that you may have thought. BMW has tested there. Actually, I think he noted that the team noted for that test was Team RLL. Andrew Kissinger was pretty quick to correct that RLL did not do any testing over at Imola. It was a big question mark on why Ray Hall Letterman would go over there in the first place, considering they're only running stateside, unless they were trying to do some unexpected Le Mans bid, in which case it still doesn't make sense to run at Imola. So potentially WRT was maybe taking advantage of one of RLL's testing days for that car. The whole testing regulations in the GTP/hypercar class are a little bit interesting, where the manufacturer gets a certain number of days to test, and then teams also get a certain number of days to test. Not really too sure how that one broke down, but interesting to note. Cadillac also had some testing time over at Imola with Chip Ganassi Racing. Ferrari has tested over there. I know they tested with the Privateer AF Corsa number 83 car in recent months. I believe they all have also tested there with the fully factory 50 and 51 cars last year as well. Isata Fraschini has done some testing laps over at Imola, and Porsche in both the factory program and Joda teams has also done some testing over there. So 5 of those manufacturers hitting the ground, not completely blind. I think the notable loss there is Toyota, who will be hitting Imola with a completely clean slate. We're not there the last time they ran in 2011. And I'll be interested to see where they stack up, especially in some of the earlier practice sessions, and see how they can progress through the weekend. Imola is, just talking about the track a little bit right now, is a lot more of an old school track than what we saw at Qatar for the season opener. Qatar was a very, for the most part, clean race, safety car free race. I think Imola might be a bit different from that. I wouldn't be surprised to see a safety car bunch up the field at Imola. If you go off track there, you're not really going to get a whole lot of mercy thrown towards you. The walls are pretty close at Imola. There's really no paved runoff. And especially if the track is wet, or maybe even if just the grass is wet and some of the drivers go offline, might catch some people out and have some cars end up in the wall. Just something to keep of note. Some of these teams, though, it is not their first time running at Imola. The 4 hours of, I almost said 4 hours of Qatar. 4 hours of Imola has been a race on the European Le Mans Series for the past probably 5 years now, I want to say. So some of those LMGT3 teams do have experience racing there, and we'll have some data to pull from. Want to go over the points standings as it stands right now in the WEC. Of course, Qatar was a story all about Porsche, with the unfortunate drop of the 9X8 in the last couple of laps of that race. It's the number 6 Porsche of Kevin Estre, Andre Lauder, and Lawrence Vantor that's leading the points right now at 38, with a much different point system than IMSA has. Number 12, Jota Sport Porsche is in second place. Callum Ilott, Norman Nato, and Will Stevens, 11 points back on the leading 6 car. And then a few points behind them is the number 5, the sister Penske Porsche Motorsport entry of Matt Campbell, Michael Christensen, Fred Makovecki, sitting at 24 points right now. And then fourth place after the disqualification of Cadillac from Qatar is the number 83 customer entered Ferrari 499P of Kubica, Schwartzman, and Yiffy Yi. And then rounding out the top 5 is the number 7 Toyota of Mike Conway, Kamui Kobayashi, and Nick DeVries, who will definitely be wanting to show people that they're not struggling as much as they were at Qatar. I think that was one of the standout stories from Qatar, is how much the Toyota team was struggling. They're going to want to find a 180 at Imola. In the GT3 class, it is the 92 Porsche. Porsche is leading in both categories right now. Manthey and Pure Racing at 38 points, followed by the 27 Heart of Racing Aston Martin at 27. The 777D Station Racing Aston in third. The Team WRT BMW, the number 31 car, in fourth, sitting at 20 points behind the leader. And then rounding out the top 5 is the 54 Vista AF Corsa Ferrari 296 GT3, LMGT3, if we want to get technical, at 15 points. So I did a lot of rambling there. I did the thing where I sort of don't even give you a chance to chime in. We got a 6-hour endurance race, though, for this weekend, starting at 7 a.m. Eastern time for you and myself. So bit of an early wake up, but I'm sort of curious to hear some of your thoughts about Imola.
Yeah, Imola is a track, honestly, for me, on the World Endurance Championship calendar that I have circled as one of the ones that I am very interested in. I love it because of what you mentioned. It's a little bit of an older school track, with me being diehard IMSA fan. I love the old school tracks that we see in IMSA. I feel like Imola takes a lot of the characteristics of that. And it's not paved runoff everywhere. There's some grass and there's some dirt. If you put a wheel off, there's going to be consequences to pay for that. So had Imola circled for a while. Really looking forward to seeing this race. I think the hypercar battle is going to be a great one to watch. Just so many cars being on the grid here. If Toyota is still going to be, back sort of middle of the pack, I think that really blows the doors wide open for who could step up and take the win here. And we're going to talk about that in a sec, what our predictions are going to be. But yeah, really looking forward to watching, especially the hypercar battle around here. And just the old school nature of this track. There's so much history with this track in different forms of racing. Really, really looking forward to Imola. And if this is going to be a one-off race for the track, if we are indeed going to be returning to Monza in future years, I think that's going to make this sort of all the more special. So yeah, really looking forward to Imola.
Yeah. You mentioned some of those predictions. Of course, I already teased that we have made our picks for Imola as well. I went for a continuation of Porsche's success, not just in IMSA, but also in the WEC, following up that win at Qatar with the number 6 sister Penske Porsche Motorsport 963. I think that they were the one that got away, let's just say, at Qatar. Ran into a couple of issues in the race earlier on, but had a great rebound drive. I think that had they run Qatar issue free, they definitely would have been the car that came out on top that race. I think their driver lineup right now is really stellar, and Porsche has some data already to pull from Imola. So I think a lot of their cards are in their favor. I think Ferrari might be a favorite to a lot of people, and I know that's just a nice segue into what you picked. You picked the number, was it number 51, the Le Mans winning Ferrari 499P, who is yet to pick up another win in the World Endurance Championship. But what a better place to do it, I guess, than sort of their home soil, not too far from Maranello.
Yeah, I think the storylines are too great here. I love a good storyline to follow. I think any of the Ferraris are definitely going to be contenders to win this race. But yeah, I really like the number 51. I really like the number 51. I think this is Ferrari's race. I think they can put it all together and pull out the win here in a very competitive hypercar class. It is going to be a fun battle. I think it's difficult to nail down a real favorite in this one.
Yep. Moving to the GT ranks, I went for if you want to talk about not just an Italian favorite, but a favorite in general, the 46 Team WRT BMW with Valentino Rossi in the driver lineup. I think that car also showed a lot of promise at Qatar, but just ultimately didn't have everything go their way. I think BMW should be a pretty strong car at a track like Imola, and I don't know if I have a whole lot else to add. The ones I picked, though, in GT3, you went for the all-Italian lockout. How about that, of the Ferrari winning in Hypercar and Lamborghini, the number 60 Iron Lynx Lamborghini, winning in LMGT3.
Yep, I did. I really like the line. You know what? I'm not going to lie. There's definitely an influence of, the Italian teams winning in Italy. This would be a lot. It would be a lot of fun to see. But you also got to acknowledge how good this lineup is in the number 60. Claudio Schiavone. I'm probably butchering that name. I apologize. It's close enough. Matteo Cressoni, and then Frank Pereira. Of course, Frank is the only non-Italian in the car, so it's not an all-Italian team. But regardless, a very strong driver lineup here. I think Lamborghini, they didn't really get this would be a big breakthrough win for them with that new Evo spec car. They just introduced it last year. They've yet to really have that huge breakout win. I think they can get it here, and I think Iron Lynx with the number 60 and that driver lineup is the team to do it. I think that car is due a big win, and what bigger place for them to do it than an Italian team, an Italian manufacturer. Well, I guess Iron Lynx I don't think is Italian based, but Italian drivers, an Italian car in Italy, it would be huge.
I thought Iron Lynx was Italian based.
I'm not 100% sure. They might be. I'm not 100% sure.
We'll fact check that.
Yeah. Somebody fact check me. Yeah.
Next year in the comments said, I'm going to go Caddy and Hypercar and TF Sport and GT3, mainly due to them having testing data. I think Cadillac's a great dark horse pick. I really do. And I think they were actually my bonus pick. I said that a Cadillac would be a very strong contender, and they'd very likely end up on the podium. As you mentioned, they tested there. And I just think that car is due a little bit more success in the WEC. They have yet to pick up a win, although they do have quite a bit of podiums to their name. And obviously had a pretty strong race at Qatar that ultimately fell short due to that disqualification. Wouldn't be surprised at all to see them on the podium at the very least. And then TF Sport with that Corvette going for that all GM lockout in Italy. I think another comment here. Honestly, the first barometer to use as a way to judge a good sports car endurance race these days is the safety car frequency. That's why I rate Qatar's WEC race so high. Yeah, we talked about that in the post-Sebring episode, didn't we? Where we sort of weighed the pros and cons of having a sports car endurance race with a lot of safety cars. Everybody loves a good grandstand finish and is not going to sit and complain about the way that Sebring ended this year. But there is definitely something, especially when you go into some of those longer endurance races, about seeing a race just pan out from start to finish. I would be a little surprised if Imola goes completely safety car free, regardless of what weather conditions happen throughout the race. Just because of the way the track is set up, it's a largely unfamiliar track to quite a few of the teams still. Well, I guess Qatar was as well, but Qatar was largely helped by the fact that they had miles of runoff. So we'll see if we get a similar story at this race. But three main GTE manufacturers are over the past few years. I'm just trying to see if this was a response. Or the past few years. Sorry. I was reading this wrong. The three main GTE manufacturers over the past few years in the WEC are Porsche, Ferrari, and Aston Martin. Honestly, any of those cars winning WEC GT3 race will be a surprise. Any car outside of those three. Okay, I was thinking because at Qatar, those were really the three manufacturers that were pretty strong.
Yeah.
And some of that ties down to the fact that some of those manufacturers already have that experience running in GT. We've talked a lot about data here. If you want to look at some of those new manufacturers in the LMGT3 class right now, United Autosport coming down from the LMP2 class to a McLaren GT3, they're not going to be going in there with the same level of knowledge as a team like D Station with the Aston Martin or Manthey racing the Porsche. At least for most tracks on the schedule. So I think as we get later in the season, we might see some more of those manufacturers contend a little bit stronger. But right now, you're right. It does seem like those three are sort of the favorites in that class right now. So I actually realized I skipped over your bonus pick for Imola right now, which was the...
Another Italian entry.
Really favoring those guys right now. You planning a trip there or something?
I'm all in on Italy right now.
Did somebody offer you a discount on an Airbnb if you talked high of the Italians?
Yeah, the Italian tourism board is heavy in my court right now. So go Italy.
Well, in any case, you mimicked my Sebring pick actually, which is that the Lamborghini SC63 hypercar will race strong and finish in the top 5. I think that's even more ambitious than when I suggested that at Sebring.
Probably.
For a couple of reasons. I think the WEC is a lot less lenient to some of the newer entries than we see in IMSA. At least in terms of... You don't see a new car in the WEC just immediately walk in as the favorites performance-wise. Whether that be down to the balance of performance that they were assigned or... down to just a lack of experience on those circuits with that car. We saw last year most of the manufacturers struggle for the entirety of this season just trying to get some knowledge down of the tracks. And that's why Toyota really walked away with last season. And this season we're seeing like it potentially be a bit of a flip-flop of that. Now that those manufacturers finally have some of that data under their belt. But also there's a lot more hypercars to be dealt with in the WEC than we're seeing in the GTP class in IMSA right now. But everything goes their way. Could be a fan favorite result there with that Lamborghini also finishing in the top 5 alongside the Ferrari that you picked as your winner.
Yeah, I mean, look, Lamborghini, they survived Sebring.
Yeah.
If they can survive Sebring, then, you're pretty confident that they can survive anything. And they survived Sebring on the lead lap. I know there were a ton of full course yellows that helped out with that. But even when they were up against the wall at the end of it, there was a moment where, I think it was Grosjean in the car trying to stay on the lead lap. And there was some speed in that car.
Yeah.
So this is a bold prediction. I acknowledge that, but it could happen. It could happen, especially if we get a safety car or two in this race.
Yeah. And, actually, you talked about how Lamborghini survived Sebring. And I think that came as a surprise to some people, but they didn't just survive Sebring. They survived a 10-hour race at Qatar, or just under 10-hour race at Qatar, a 9-hour and 56-minute race.
The 1812 of Qatar, is that what it was?
That is what it officially was, and they did go the advertised distance. They have yet to really have any big reliability issues with that car. Here's some wood. I'll knock on it for you. Yeah. Sorry if that just clipped the mic. But, and I think if they can make it through the 6-hour race at Imola without any real mechanical issues, they're going to start putting some of those concerns to rest. Ultimately, the big test for them, they don't have a 24-hour race under their belt yet. We're going to see 2 of those cars at Le Mans this year. That's going to be the ultimate question for them. But I think if they leave if they leave Imola with, they don't need to finish in the top 5. If they can get into the top 10, that's already a great performance from them. But mainly if they can go the distance and not run into any reliability issues, or any major reliability issues at least, I think that's going to be the ultimate test for them.
I think you're spot on. Although they're going to finish top 5 because that's my prediction, right?
Yeah. Looked like a couple of people were calling you out on that, saying bonus prediction for the WEC, Lamborghini top 5 in the hypercar class. Oh, never mind. This is his prediction, saying he's predicting a top 5 for the Lamborghini.
Smart.
Yeah. Let's see. Did you guys watch GT World Challenge at Paul Ricard? Great race with the second Rover Racing BMW winning. Mustang ran very well. I'll be honest, I did not watch that race. I need to do a better job at watching the GT World Challenge. I don't find myself watching GT3 racing as much as I nearly should, with the exception of that being 24 hours of Spa, 12 hours of Bathurst, and mainly the 24 hours of Nürburgring, which has really ranked its way up to one of my favorite races in the world. But short answer is no, I did not catch that race, although I should try to make an effort to catch some more of those, because we talk about how much the hypercar class is in its prime right now. The GT3 category, while I don't think it's quite at the ultimate peak as it was maybe a few years ago, is still just really a competitive format right now. And any opportunity to watch GT3 cars, I think we should be taking advantage of it more. Although there are a bunch of opportunities to see it. There's definitely no shortage of GT3 racing.
And good GT3
right
racing.
Yeah.
Good GT3 racing.
It'll be extremely interesting if we've got a wet qualifying / race. I know Penske, Jota, and Chip Ganassi Racing have tested in the rain, as well as TF Sport with their C8R or C8 Z06 GT3.R, I think it's called. Yeah, I know most of the teams have gotten some testing in the rain. BMW tested in the rain at Spa last year, as I recall. So yeah, I don't recall any time since Le Mans last year, though, where any of the sessions have been run. Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, Fuji last year, a couple of the practice sessions were run in the rain. But we don't often get a wet race in the WEC. I think Le Mans was the last time we got a wet race. So I'd be interested to see if we got something like that, although it doesn't look entirely likely right now. This is a continuation of the Mustang performance from Paul Ricard, saying they're still having issues with the rear deck on that Mustang.
Yeah.
And if you want to talk about questions to to keep an eye on for Long Beach and for Imola this weekend. Ford has been struggling really recently in those two championships. And I think that Long Beach is going to be a test for them as well. We're talking a sprint race for them. There's not as much time for some of the issues to go wrong with that car. Although at Imola, if we do see some more rear deck issues with that car, I'm wondering how long it's going to take them to get those sorted, because it's definitely been a repeat offender. And I saw it was also an issue with that race at Paul Ricard as well.
Yeah, Ford's going to have to ramp up manufacturing of those rear deck lids or trunks, the boot, whatever you want to call it.
Yep. Rain racing was a great memory of the early ALMS Grand Am combined IMSA series. GTLMs on Michelin tires would outrun the DP/LMP2 cars on the Continental tires whenever it rained. Yeah, that's the 2015 Petit Le Mans right there. Is the most notable time that happened, with the Porsche GTLM car winning overall. We don't really see that nowadays, though, with the Michelin tires all around in the IMSA championship, and I guess GT3 cars just are not anywhere near the level of performance as the hypercars to even make that an issue if Goodyear was miles off of where Michelin is, which really they aren't in the WEC. Catching a couple other questions here. I feel like there's a lot more crossover in sports car racing now than in the 2000s with ALMS, Le Mans Series, and FIA GT. In prototype racing, I would say that's fairly true, although we did see a good level of crossover in the early 2000s when you had those the LMP1 class was really the top class in the American Le Mans Series, and over in Europe and worldwide as well. That's where we saw Audi running with their Champion Racing program over stateside in the ALMS, and then you'd have the same Audi R8/R10 running over in Europe and winning Le Mans multiple times. I'm glad that we're finally at a point right now where we've returned to that, because for a good decade or so, as IMSA converged as the American Le Mans Series and Grand Am converged to form the unified IMSA championship that we have nowadays, the top class for prototype racing was different between IMSA and the worldwide scene. The DPI cars were supposed to be able to race in the LMP2 class at Le Mans initially, or at least race at Le Mans in some capacity. That ultimately fell through. And we're just now at a point again where we're seeing the strengths of convergence and seeing these manufacturers race in both championships. So I'd say there's a lot more crossover right now than there was probably 10 years ago. But we saw quite a bit of crossover in the early 2000s to early 2010s as well, I'd say.
An interesting question here that kind of tags along with crossover in sports car racing. Do you think it's possible that no Cadillacs are on the grid this next year? Now, I think that may be actually WEC or WEC focused. I think we're going to still see four cars. I think we're not still going to see. I think we're going to see an increase to four cars between IMSA and the WEC next year. But Chris, do you think that we? I don't think we'll really see Cadillac drop off the WEC.
No, it's highly, highly, highly unlikely. Is what I would say. Even when the initial Chip Ganassi Racing story was dropped, it seemed pretty quick that some journalists and people with more knowledge than I have were pretty quick to step up and say that there's other teams that have already been in discussion with Cadillac. There's a lot of pieces that are still moving around right now. So I would say no, we're very likely to see Cadillac on the grid in both championships next season. Question of how many cars and what teams they're running with is there's still some moving pieces going on there, but no, you should definitely see them on the grid next year.
and we have a double race weekend this year, or this weekend as well.
Yeah.
This is when I think we were talking about this before we started, that this is when we start to see, there's boots on the ground in the paddock, getting stories, talking to these teams. So I'm sure we're going to see, we might see some nuggets of news come out over the course of this weekend as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. And for the past couple of episodes now, we haven't had any huge news drops. It's a good point, though, that every time we hit the ground at a sports car race, it seems like whether it's a definitive story gets dropped or whether just a rumor goes around and gets published. That's something that I wish I had more knowledge that I could report on. I'm not going to be able to give you the same level of insight as a Graham Goodwin or a Marshall Pruitt or John Daggy's. At the end of the day, I'm a fan. All right, I'm going to comment on these things as a fan and give you my takes on things as I see it with the information that I have, which is, for the most part, is the same level of information that most other people would have. I'm going to be careful when I say this, but last week we got a question from Formula Jonah about whether I thought Ganassi could drive or could be fronting an Acura effort in IMSA next season. This is a good example of me saying I don't know what I'm talking about, and I don't have a great deal of insider knowledge. But there was a story that was published about a week ago, and I don't. Again, I'm going to be careful with how I say it because it is a paywalled article, and I do want to respect their publishing of that. I'll link it in the description, though, if you want to take a look at it yourself. But again, it is behind a paywall. That there is a possibility that we see Ganassi brought to the forefront next year with a potential Acura program. There's just a lot of moving pieces, though, that are still going on. So don't rule it out of the realm of possibility. What I said last week about it being unlikely sounds like it might not be the ultimate case. All right. Well, I'm trying to think. I don't know if we have a whole lot else to discuss this episode. We got a good hour and 15-ish minute episode in. But next week we'll have no shortage of things to go over with the complete 180 of this. Doing a recap of both of those races and trying to hit, hopefully, some of the news pieces that we get out of the Long Beach and Imola race weekends. Stu, I got to ask you right now, are you doing the 7 a.m. wake up for Imola? I'm going to put you on the spot.
I'm going to try to, in the most Canadian fashion possible. I have our final day of curling is on the Saturday night. So there's usually a party that follows. So 7 a.m. might be tough, but I'm going to try and power through it.
Yeah. Well, that works out because the last WEC race at Qatar, I was out with friends the night before at a hockey game, which is also quintessentially Canadian. So
it is.
But and that race started at, I think, 5 a.m. Eastern time. So
yeah,
fingers crossed. I got no issues with this one. Yeah, we'll have plenty to discuss next week, and we hope to see you all there. For tonight, though, I'm going to wrap this episode up. Thank you all for tuning in to another episode of the Rain Race Podcast. Hope to see you next week. Take care.